So we are going to move straight on to our Farm to Table panel, which will be moderated by Martha Rose Shulman, who I'm sure many of you are very familiar with her Recipes for Health column in the New York Times. And she's a jack of many trades. She's written many, many cookbooks. She's a longtime friend of Oldways. We've had the pleasure of traveling with her. She's a founding contributor to zesterdaily.com and also has a cooking school. And joining Martha will be 3 award-winning Boston area chefs, Anna Sortun from Oleana, Barry Maiden from Hungry Mother, and Jason Bond from Bondir, and also Liz L'Etoile of 4 Star Farms, who supplies many restaurants with whole grains. Welcome, and I'll turn everything over to Martha to get the ball rolling.
Thank you, everybody, for getting away from your restaurants and farms and coming in. I know that as a food writer, whenever I feature grains in my New York Times Recipes for Health, the hits go way up. I mean, there could be a major election, but if quinoa is the subject, it'll be like most emailed after the election results. Just that's the way it is. So I want to, first of all, I want everybody to introduce him or herself and talk about what you do in your restaurant or your farm. And then why don't each of you talk about what grains really get the most menu hits in your restaurants, and then I've got a lot of other questions for you. So, Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Sortun. I have a few restaurants in Cambridge, well, actually 2 in Cambridge, 1 in Somerville. And the question was what?
What grains do you sell best on your menus?
Well, quinoa and couscous are definitely 2 big buzzwords, I think. But for us, we're focused on Eastern Mediterranean cuisines, so we use a lot. Our big whole grain is bulgur, which is a staple, and it's also really light and quick cooking. But I think couscous is sort of fading out. Quinoa is definitely the buzzword, I think, in general. But we try to promote some other grains that we're really crazy about. One is grano that we use a lot of. Bulgur is our main staple. A little bit of quinoa and a couple of other fun whole grains a new one that I'm trying to source right now too, which is kind of fun.
And how do you work quinoa into a Eastern Mediterranean? You just throw it in as an ingredient.
Well, we don't use quinoa a lot, but what we've really enjoyed doing lately is, which is like crisping it up, so toasting it and then frying it in olive oil and then using it with a lot of spices to sort of sprinkle on something.
Sort of a dukkha kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And then, but we've also incorporated in, like tonight it's in a pilaf that has a lot of Persian spices and pistachios, barberries, and it's stuffed into a little miniature butternut squash. So, we can transform the flavor of it, and change it from rice to something like quinoa, but it's not a staple like the bulgur is.
Next.
Hi. Hello. Barry Maiden. I'm a chef at Hungry Mother and State Park, both in Cambridge. We pretty much the restaurant foundation is based on grains, being southern, and grits are a huge part of what we do. We use different kinds of grits that we get. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Mr. Glenn Roberts, who's probably been here maybe a couple times, part of this council. Glenn Roberts is the owner of Anson Mills down in Columbia, South Carolina. And we're a huge fan, big supporter of everything that he does. Actually, I'm not sure that we would even exist without, if he were to cease to exist, so would we, I think. I don't know where. I'm sure that I could find some alternatives, but Anson Mills is is pretty much the sole provider for everything we do. So lots of grits, tons of different kinds of heirloom grits, white, yellow, lots of cornmeal for the cornbread. And people often wonder, they've had several versions of cornbread, but then they come to Hungry Mother and kind of wonder why the cornbread is so good there. And it really has nothing to do with me. It's a pretty basic cornbread recipe. It's just, it's really certainly a nod to the grain that we're using and the freshness of that cornmeal and the coarseness of it and the pure flavor that you can't get from cornmeal that's been sitting or milled for a long time or sitting. That, in addition, we use farro as part of our farro. You wouldn't really consider to be particularly Southern, but we make it Southern, somehow. But we just like using all of these things. Farros are really always kind of on the menu in some form. Lots of peas and beans, hominy, moonshine. Does that count?
Sure, it's great from all.
I think that's going another direction. But yes, tons and tons and tons of grains. We get about anywhere in a week. We get about 130 pounds of grains in a week, and we go through it really quickly. We keep it all refrigerated and use it as it comes in, and it's really so nice for these bags of things that come in. And I love putting it away, like storing it away, and like opening up the bags and just like running my hands through it. And this beautiful like Carolina gold rice and all these things. I just like love putting it away and like touching it and like smelling it and like looking at it, and I'll take pictures of it, and it kind of just never gets old. And that's 6 years later, I'm still fascinated by the stuff that we get from him. So yeah, that's it.
That's cool.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Bond. I own a Bondir restaurant. We have a small one in Cambridge that's 4 years old, and one in Concord, Massachusetts. It's 1 year old. I have a different situation than Barry and Anna, where my cuisine is not tied to anything in particular. It's so I can cook Southern or Turkish or Indian or whatever I feel like, and so that's fun. My restaurant is more about, as the name is, my name is Bond, so Bondir. It's more about the personal expression of what I'm, my background and what I'm looking at and the experience and that kind of thing. So I use a lot of grains, a lot of different kinds of grains, because it allows me to look at my past experience. It allows me to explore new ideas. And the cool thing about grains is there's so many and so many different types and varieties and colors and variations that you can really take a basic thing like a pasta dough, and it will make a different dough every day, or our bread will make a different dough every day, and you can vary the qualities of it according to your whim or according to maybe an effect you're trying to create in a dish, a context you're trying to set, and use the different types of grains to help you paint that picture, get a certain color into a dish. Or, so grains offer a huge variety of ways to cook. Even one simple recipe can be changed dramatically.
And Liz, you come at it from the farm viewpoint. Are you supplying restaurants with grains?
I am. My family farm started growing grains about 6 years ago because we were in western Massachusetts in a small town called Northfield. We noticed that one thing missing from the food landscape here in Massachusetts, which is a pretty progressive food landscape, was grains. So then we planted barley just to see if we could grow it. Mm-hmm. And it was something that we could grow. We took it around to restaurants, and isn't this wonderful? But our barley wasn't hulled. It was still in its very raw state because we knew so little about grains. We knew that we could grow it. Right. But it created a unique opportunity to begin working very closely with different bakeries, different restaurants, one, to see what their needs were in terms of grains that they were interested in using, as well as to help us understand the final states where they need to be. So from that point 6 years ago, where we had a bag of barley and my smiling face showing up on different people's doors, we're now to the place where we have a stone mill right on site at our farm, and we mill to order every single week. So when I go to Jason's restaurant or Anna's restaurant, I take their order on Monday, we mill it on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I deliver it on Thursday. So it is absolutely the freshest that it could be. And that's kind of what we're most excited about and most proud of being able to do.
That's terrific. Now, how do your customers in your restaurants know how fresh these grains are? And I'm going to backtrack and start with another question because I want to know about the relationship that the customer has now with the whole idea of whole grains. Do they express an interest? Is it something that when they come into your restaurant, are they drawn to whole grains, or is it just the whole dining experience and the whole grains are part of it? Somebody have an answer?
Well, let's see. Again, I think they're not coming to Bondir because of any particular thing they're looking for, but our employees, the people I work with, are really excited about what we do, and so they love the bread, they love the pastas, they love the different variety that they see every day, and they're excited about it, and they translate that to our guests who are interested. And our menus are kind of squirrely and all over the place, and a lot of people that come in don't really know what they're getting, and some don't like it, but for the most part, they'll try these things that they haven't seen before and be excited about them because they haven't seen them before.
Yeah.
And that's the effect that I think that I see most, the little surprises you get from these grains that they're not expecting.
So they're curious and they want to try.
Yeah, there's varieties they haven't seen.
Yeah. And are your guests interested in health? I mean, is that something that a person going to a restaurant is thinking about? Do you think? Anna, do you ever?
Well, I think I think one of the fun things that all of us have in common is that we have a responsibility to show people that there's more than just white flour to work with, and I think when you're like in my case, when we use fine bulgur wheat and bind our meatballs or our kufta with that instead, we take away any fear that whole grains have to be heavy or have to be hard or take a long time to cook. And so it's sort of fun to be able to show that. And I'm just curious, is there anyone in this room that has tasted fresh ground flour, like whole wheat flour, like 2 days old?
Maybe not that. I'm coming.
So, I didn't experience this until I met Liz, really. I don't think I did. I wasn't really paying attention, but it completely changes everything, and it's really sweet, and you can actually taste the grain. For me, whole grains are delicious above all, and so I think the health aspect is a bonus. But to be able to taste 4 Stars flour in bread, right after it's been ground, the day before is a spectacular experience. So,
now, how has the gluten aversion been affecting your customer? Your relationship with your customers. Given that bulgur, that wheat is such a foundation of the cuisines that you specialize in. You're dealing more with corn, so you probably don't have that, but with the wheat, are you getting a lot of pushback, or do?
Well, for me, I grew up in Wyoming and Kansas, and so wheat's part of, you're surrounded by it, but as a chef, we're exploring more and more different varieties of grains, and a lot of those grains don't have gluten, and so we're not, we don't have a gluten-free menu, but we do, by the way we're cooking with different grains, things are often gluten-free on the menu.
Yeah.
So we'll look at a lot of different varieties. One of the breads has no gluten; it's made with different seeds, and we have a pasta that we make that has no gluten in it because of the different flours we're playing around with their different textures and their different flavors, and I think people definitely appreciate that, and they're excited. There's certainly a number of people that are very excited to see a good bread that has no gluten in it.
Right.
A pasta that has no gluten, it's huge for people. So,
how do you? I'm so curious about how you can keep this excitement about whole grains, and at the same time, have this huge movement away from grains. How do you resolve that? This kind of cultural thing that's going on in our country right now.
It might just be a vocal minority. I don't know. There's people like bread a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have many people in the restaurant turning away the bread.
I mean,
plate.
what are you finding, Anna, in your restaurants? Are you finding people coming in and saying, "Oh, I'd love that, but it has gluten in it"?
I think we're up to about 30% now of a lot of customers avoiding gluten, or just avoiding it, not an allergy, but avoiding it. But there's we work around it, and I think as all of these sort of crazes, this will pass. This will pass just like everything else. But I mean, I think for me, it's hard for me to understand what's really going on, but I don't necessarily think that it's just the gluten. I think it's some other things going on too. So, I mean, we don't try. I mean, I have a bakery called Sofra in Cambridge, and how many times have we been asked to do gluten-free stuff? And I can't. I mean, I can in some things that are meant to be gluten-free, but in other things I can't. I can't necessarily accommodate it. Plus, there's so much gluten around anyways that we couldn't actually really truly be gluten-free. Right. So yeah, I think I just cross my fingers that it'll pass, just like a lot of other things will pass, and then we'll get to the bottom of what it really is. Is it the gluten, or is it the the sawdust in the bread, or the chemical yeast that we're using, and not the gluten? I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering about it myself. Now, when you have different grains on your menu, whether they're gluten-y or not, are the customers curious about the backstory about the grains, what they are? Because it seems like, especially with your farm and with the milling, there's a great backstory to tell your customers. How curious are they?
Well, for me, part of every dish on the menu is a little story, and often it's about the producer. Mm-hmm. And all the servers know the stories and can talk about where the chicken came from, or about the different farms. Sometimes there's a history to a grain as well that I'm proud of, and we try and share that. And like we spent a long time sourcing a grain called quinoa, which is like a quinoa relative. Huh. And it took me a couple of years to finally find someone that I could buy it from. And the first night I was on the menu, a Peruvian woman was having dinner, and she's like, "Oh, I haven't seen this since I was a kid." I was shocked that anybody knew it, for one. But one, I just think that people, they do like the backstories, and we don't put it out there in the beginning, but for those people who are interested, our staff has the knowledge of the stories to share it. And to me, that's the important part, is those relationships we have with the growers, and or at least our stewarding sometimes of grains that we haven't seen for a long time.
I mean, I find that when I'm in a restaurant and I look at the menu, it's the dishes that have grains that always attract my interest, because you just don't see them every day. And so, I'm much more interested in the grain and the produce that's going with the protein than the protein itself, if I'm looking at a fish dish or a meat dish. Do you think that whole grains are and will always seem exotic to most customers?
Sure. I think, for us, we don't get as exotic. I think my business partners just had dinner at Bondir the other night, and they were talking about some of the wonderful grains that they had over there, and they didn't know what they were eating, but they said they loved it, and they were interested in it, and they're food people, and they were really impressed with what it was and being introduced to something new. So I think there's definitely people out there who want to know what it is and more information about it, and others, for us, it's not, ours, the single most complimentary thing at Hungry Mother is because it's Southern food. People just kind of take the things that we serve for granted. a little bit in ways that, oh, it's just grits, or it's just cornmeal, or it's just this and that. But then when they taste it, you can really taste the difference. But when I had the producer, and this would be the equivalent of you going in to Jason's restaurant or Anna's restaurant and having dinner and seeing what they do with your grains and how are they preparing them. You're seeing it from one angle, and they're taking your stuff and they have their vision with it. So I was able to do that for Glenn when he came into the restaurant, and he came in unannounced and sat down and ate dinner and called to the kitchen and said, let the chef know that Mr. Anson is here. And I was like, first of all, there's no Mr. Anson. His name is Mr. Roberts, and if that's who's sitting at the table, then I'll be happy to go out. And so the server came back and said, Mr. Roberts is sitting at table 10. And so I went out there, and he was like, they produce a lot of stuff. So he's like, I see my product on menus all the time. And, I travel around, and I see Anson Mills this and Anson Mills that. He's like, but this is my vision for the way the grains are supposed to be used.
Could you describe some of the dishes on the menu?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, back then, that was so many years ago when we first opened. We were just doing
it. Something you're doing now
it was all simple. I take the philosophy of that farm and what they do there, and sort of the Carolina rice kitchen cuisine, and cook them in the most simplest ways by not manipulating them too much. I'm a pretty purist when it comes to cooking grits with just water and salt, and there's no cream or butter. Actually, there's a little bit of butter, but no cream, and just let the grains speak for themselves, and the cornbread, and everything's really simple. It's just like the recipes. If you read on the recipes, I refer to their website a lot to say, how do they prepare this rice? How do they want you prepare it? It's just a little bit of aromatics, a little bit of laurel or bay leaf, and a little bit of celery and salt and butter, and that's it. And I think that approach, he appreciated that approach to his grains, and not taking them and going crazy and making them unidentifiable and
And when you serve, say, the Carolina rice, do you get customers who are asking for brown rice, say, or who associate white rice with refined?
Right. So far, 0 requests for brown rice. I think most people do appreciate what it is we're serving. I do make a point that it does say Carolina rice on the menu, but. If people choose not to eat rice for whatever reason, health reasons or other reasons, they just usually exclude it from their meal and substitute it with a vegetable or something.
And are you all, as restaurateurs that really do incorporate grains onto your menu, are you finding with the paleo movement, some pushback with your sales of those dishes? No?
What does the paleo exactly mean?
You're asking the wrong person, but from what I understand, it's grains are not supposed to be part of the diet. It's all about
no grains,
right?
0 grains. Yeah. I would lose all my guests.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's where they sneak out to be bad.
Right.
They go off their diet.
Yeah, I think they cheat and they come in.
They cheat, yeah.
Exactly.
Let me see. So, this conference really is, it's about breaking barriers, and I guess I want to put a question out to each of you. Has there ever been a barrier in your experience as a chef and restaurateur to whole grains, and if so, where have you seen it break down, and what do you think the future looks like? Why don't you each?
No barrier for me. I mean, I think if anything, it takes a little bit of each whole grain is different. It's not like there's one way to cook whole grain, and I think they all taste different too. So I don't see the barriers, but I do see a lot of the old seeds, a lot of older varieties, and I think if I understood it correctly, there's a lot of different wheats that are indigenous to the United States, but we only grow one, and so I think that whole movement is changing a lot, and I think there's some pretty delicious whole wheats out there that we don't know about yet. So I think if we can get to the bottom of what it is that's bothering everybody, whether it's the gluten or the yeast or the paper pulp or whatever it is, I think it's going to unfold into all these other things. But there's also lots of whole grains that don't have gluten as well, so it's not limited. And I think it's a whole can of worms. It's a great source of protein. And I just found this one. I brought this with me because I was actually going to ask you all a question. I got this in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, and it's called einkorn and siyez in Turkish. And apparently it's the oldest recorded wheat ever grown, but it has a really incredible high protein and very small amount of gluten in it. And it looks very labor intensive. I was told that I have to clean it, which that could be an obstacle for anyone.
Send it to my
But again, this is an heirloom bulgur that died for a long time and now is being revived. And I think that's what happens in general. Things die and then they're revived.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to take this, but barriers. Again, I think that was a good point of looking at this bag of grains in the grocery store, and you're just kind of like, what am I going to do with this, and how am I going to cook this? So there's the intimidation factor, I think, of discovery of how to cook things, and we're still all in that sort of. People are cooking more and more at home, I think, and but it's still a little bit of a convenience. If something can cook, even myself, I have brown jasmine rice at home, and it just takes so much longer to cook than white jasmine rice. So a lot of times you just find yourself making the white rice instead of the brown rice, just for convenience. And I think that's a big thing. And if people start seeking out grains that are milled for their flavor, such as her flour and Glenn's stuff, and not for being produced for disease resistance or how far it can travel, or and more focused on the flavor of the grain, and people start seeking that out, I think that would be most ideal for most of the artisan makers, and then it would put all the chefs out of business because we don't have to do anything else anymore.
Well, apparently they're not going to start cooking, judging from the last presentation.
Yeah, I agree with Barry that so much commercially is produced not for the food qualities, but for the production cycle qualities. And opening my first restaurant 4 years ago, I was really focused on trying to find the best ingredients that I could, best from a qualitative food point of view. And so you could find grist mills and stone mills all over the place, but you could never find ones that knew where their grain really was coming from. Just you could find ones up in New Hampshire, but it's from Kansas or Nebraska. But so it was thrilling to meet Liz right when I was first opening, because here we had a stone mill and people who were growing it, and they knew exactly what they were growing, and I knew exactly where it was and how they're producing it, and so that was a barrier when I first opened, trying to find, just like any other vegetable I might serve, I want to feel good about what I'm serving and know, who's behind it, what's behind it, the methods. So meeting Liz was thrilling. We've met other farmers, like in Coleraine that grow einkorn, farmers up in Maine that grow emmer, people down in Georgia that grow different varieties of corn. So we're meeting people that have been doing things, growing specific varieties and sort of with identifiable, clear methods that we feel good about.
And how are you finding these suppliers?
A lot of telephone time, a lot of just research time.
That's fantastic. Now I want to ask you now about specifically, like on your menus, are grains considered side dishes, or are they well, you're small plates, so that's not really so much of an issue. But where on the menu do the grains fall? And do you find that well, this is sort of a separate question. When you have customers who are vegetarians, do they ask you to move the grains more to the center of the plate? How do they fit into your menus?
I try and make a balanced dish wherein...
Why don't you describe some specific dishes on your menus? I think that would...
Yeah, wherein balance means you're balancing textures, chewy versus soft versus crunchy, and not every dish has to have all those things, but they should have at least a couple, maybe. And so grains play an important role in that aspect. Just they may rarely be the center of the plate, but they're often a strong supporting player.
So describe a menu item where...
And so one of the first dishes we cooked at Bondir was called vegetable mignardie, wherein each vegetable is cooked individually, and it's maybe 16 different vegetables. And one of the elements on the plate is a polenta made from teff, and we've done it just whole teff, and there's enough starch it holds itself together just like cornmeal. And it's something that most people haven't seen, except for the people that have traveled to North Africa a lot and act like it's totally normal. But it's a little cube of seared polenta like you might see at an old school Italian restaurant or something. But it has texture, it has crunch with inside. It contrasts the soft vegetables and their flavors.
I need to talk to you more about that teff because I find it really challenging. So I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
What about you?
We're trying to find some interesting ways to, I've been doing a lot of research into the ties of West African cooking into Southern cooking because it's all very relevant.
Great.
And so I started fermenting some stuff, and that's always fun for chefs to do. So we started fermenting some cornmeal for a few days, just in some water, let it sit out at room temperature. It starts to bubble, get really funky, and then we make dumplings out of that and drop it into kind of basically like a Hop and John rice and beans dish made with heirloom peas and the Carolina rice and some pork, smoked pork. And I just kind of did it and didn't tell anybody so much about the fermentation. And because when you eat it, it's interesting. You taste it, and it's like it catches you off. It catches you by surprise a little bit. It tastes as if something has spoiled or gone awry, which it kind of has. But the flavor is just so layered and interesting to me because we use these grains every day, and so we're just trying to think of interesting ways to do it. The farro is a good one. I'm sure everybody's had, we soak the farro overnight and then bust it up a little bit in like a food processor after it's softened, so it cooks a little quicker, actually. That's a good tip for any of you looking to soak it, bust it up a little bit. And then what we found too is once the farro had cooked slowly, that even after it was cooked, it still had this really firm, very firm texture. Even you cook it for hours and it's still very firm. And not very starchy. So we had taken the cooked farro and beat it with a wooden spoon. And what happens then is the starch starts to release out of it and naturally. And so we found that we could omit like the cream in the dish or less butter and make it a little bit lighter. Because that's one of the challenges for us is that Southern food is seen as such a heavy cuisine in general, fried food and things like that. And it is, some of that for sure, but I think the approach that we take is a much lighter approach in finding out ways to manipulate these grains to make them unique and different and lighten up the cuisine a little bit has really been helpful for us.
That's really a very interesting tip. I'm going to use it because one of my pet peeves has always been restaurant menus that call something made with not Italian rice or risotto, because I could never, when I try to do something like that, you don't get that creaminess,
Right.
which to me defines risotto.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that really is a great way that, okay, now you can make a farotto
Right,
that really
exactly.
has the cream.
Yep, exactly.
And what about,
Well, we use it's not just for main courses, but for small plates too. Because I like to think of the grain kind of as a binder, particularly in vegetarian cooking, because you can take a lot of vegetables. You can take any and lots of them, and create little dumplings by just folding in finely ground bulgur. The barley that we use will stew for a long time and then toss in yogurt and serve cold with lots of dried spearmint on it and lots of chilies. The grano also is a breakfast staple at Sofra. We just make a parfait with yogurt and fruits and jams, spoon sweets we call them. And that was inspired by something that I saw in Sicily, where every morning you can actually buy yogurt with grano stirred into it. So they become little vehicles to soak up flavor, and particularly in cooking with vegetables, they're great binders for that. So they're small plates, big plates, anything. They just become, again, another more interesting way of binding something than using flour.
I want to get back to the farm, Liz, because I want to know, if you're growing, what you're able to grow here, and what's the next big thing coming out of your farm?
Sure. So at this point, we had started with just barley to see if we can do it. And at this point, I think we have 10 or 11 different types of grain. Wow. So we have 3 hard red wheats, 1 soft white wheat. We can grow rye, spelt, triticale, which is a cross between wheat and rye. We just grew oats, and we were struggling to find a way to hull those, and we're now at the point where we can do that. So we'll be adding those onto the menu, or not menu, our offerings. Buckwheat we've done previously, but that's posed more challenges in terms of being able to get it into a usable product for chefs and consumers at home. And the challenging part for us in terms of being producers is it's a long-term commitment to growing grains. Particularly in New England, we get a lot of rain, and grains don't really appreciate that. Vegetables love rainwater. Grains actually want to be stressed, and that's where it's going to start really producing good proteins and things like that. So that's where we tend to struggle, and for that, we don't plant spring grains. So we always plant winter grains, which means middle of September, end of September, we're planting. The plants start to get a little bit of growth before winter comes. Essentially, you have little green sprouts that are 5 or 6 inches tall, and then it goes dormant over the winter. Once the ground starts to thaw in the springtime, those grains start to grow again, and just by having that little bit extra growth on them, they're outcompeting weeds. They're more hardy. The red wheats tend to have these kind of natural protective qualities that make them less susceptible to water-based diseases. We learned a lesson, it was 2 years ago. We plant anywhere from 100 to 130 acres worth of grain at our farm every year. We lost about 45 acres because we tried to do spring grains just to be able to offer kamut, which is a very exciting Khorasan wheat, which is one of the later buzzword grains. But because it was a spring grain, because it was a particularly rainy year, the weeds overtook it, and it was a total loss. So what we try to do is listen to our chefs, and bulgur, I hear bulgur a lot. So that's something that is certainly
and is that a particular strain of wheat that bulgur is usually? It's a particular grind. I know it's a particular grind, but in terms of variety of wheat.
Yes, I couldn't tell you what it is at this point,
but you're growing
yes,
there's particular wheat
characteristics you're looking for to be able to produce it. And so we're not exactly nimble. So we plant a grain in September, we can't harvest it until July.
Right.
And so that's a 9-month commitment.
That's
so it's kind of like
and
birthing
a gamble,
a baby.
I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. So when someone says, "What do you have that's new right now?" I'm kind of like, well, nothing. Maybe in 9 months we'll have something new and exciting. So like this year for us, it's the oats. We're really excited. There are very few people in this area that are able to grow them at this point, just because the infrastructure was lost so many years ago that it's a big investment and commitment, not only to finding things that you can grow and grow well, but also being able to get them to a finished product that consumers want to use.
And how big a yield, how big a public can you supply once you've sold to all the great chefs?
Sure. So at this point, what we're trying to do, grains in their raw form, so the whole berries, as long as you're not exposing them to, extreme temperatures and moisture, will last indefinitely if you've stored them correctly. So we're trying, because New England weather is always so variable, and with a huge loss that we took 2 years ago,
Right.
we're at the point where we're trying to have a 2-year supply on hand always, just in case. Because we also know that we're so small that if there's a year where we don't have our bread wheat, we're out of business.
Yeah.
Because if I say, sorry, I don't have it now, but can I talk to you in 10 months?
Yeah.
There's someone else who is
And the
come in at that
taste
point.
will have changed, or the
Well, from year to
consumer
year,
attitude.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, that's not necessarily the case because there's nobody else doing really what she's
Yeah.
doing. So.
Right.
We
Right,
hope.
that's
We
right.
hope. But yeah, and what you're getting at is exactly true. There's kind of this terroir very similar that you would get from grapes, grains from year to year, depending on how many sunny days, which field we've planted them in, what was planted the year before in that field. There's variability, both in terms of the flavor profiles and their basic characteristics, because some years we have bread wheats that have 16% protein, which is, top of the charts, like
Yeah.
almost terrified to use it because you think it's going to walk away on its own. And then this year we had slightly lesser, so we're down in the 11-12% range. And so it's learning what all of those factors mean. It's learning when I turn that grain into flour, how is it going to
Then
perform?
the bakers are going to get back to you and let
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, and you'll have a stickier dough this year than you will next year, and learning how to handle those things.
Yeah. Well, we have about 15 minutes, and I think we should open up the floor to questions at this point so that we can have lots of them. So. Anyone with a question, go right up to the mic. I have lots more, but I'd like to open it to the public.
You don't need a mic. What's the name of that in there in the back?
It's einkorn. Yeah, or Cias. You said they grow it here in Maine?
They do.
Yeah, I've been hearing about einkorn for a while. This kind of.
Yeah. I can get you contact information.
EINKORN. It's actually when I looked it up, I found it on the Slow Food website. It's an ARCed item, so it's like 10,000-year-old grain, like the oldest one they can find recorded. And I believe it's bulgur. At least it's ground like bulgur here. It's a coarse bulgur, so it describes it as an heirloom.
And it makes really great cookies.
It makes great
Makes
cookies.
great-
It does
Oh.
make great cookies.
Interesting.
They tend to be a little bit flatter because of the gluten, but
How's-
they're very good.
How's New England climate for einkorn?
Challenging.
I would think
Same
of
with
Turkey,
black emmer.
New
Right.
England. I don't know.
Yeah. That's exactly who.
I would remind you that you need to go to the microphone because we're being recorded.
Come to the microphone.
I didn't want to come all the way up, but I just wanted to say that we also produce einkorn.
Ooh, there you
And-
go. See?
Yeah, and it's from Italy. So we bring it in. It's organic. We grow it in Italy, and we did a lot of research on this ancient grain because it does have a lot of nutrients. It's got a great flavor palette. And we believe it's because it's never been hybridized that it's retained all these great things. And the other interesting thing about the einkorn is that people who are gluten sensitive can consume it. It's not for celiacs because it does have gluten, but because of the different DNA and the different chromosomes, people can consume it.
Right, it said it was
So-
really high in protein and
Yeah.
fat too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, in ours comes clean.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I don't know about that. She said I had to clean it. It looks pretty hard to clean.
You just need drop it in front of a fan. Slowly. Seriously. Pour it into a bowl, drop it in front of a fan that's on high
Really?
speed. That's
It
how
won't
we
blow
started.
away the grain. It just will blow away
See
the
what
fat.
happens when I
It'll
ask
blow
you
up.
guys questions? I'm so psyched.
There you go.
In your restaurants, are you serving bread baskets for the initial sit down? And what are you putting in them if
Yeah,
you are serving?
that's a great question, and I want to expand on that question and ask, do you find the whole grain breads move faster out of the bread baskets than the white breads, or the opposite, or the same? Let's talk about your bread baskets.
I do 1, 2, or 3 breads a day, depending on what time I get up and that sort of thing. So, but I don't know, people, like I say, there's not very many that get turned away. And we vary them with different ingredients and different flours. And sometimes people ask for seconds of a specific bread, but yeah, we serve it every day. We don't charge for it, but I put a lot of effort and expense into it, and we're proud of it.
Great.
We did do bread for the first 5 years. I think clear flour, we were just buying some spice baguettes and sourdough. But then we would get people who we would give the bread basket to and butter, and we would send them, they would cancel their cornbread order, basically.
Oh.
That's what it came down to. So I decided one day that I was going to stop serving bread to my guests, and that was a tough choice because we've been doing it for so long, and people come to expect it, and it's also the hospitality of serving bread as people sit down, and it's inviting and warm to give somebody something for free. But I took it away. And I still took it away. And at the end of the day, it was really more about, I want people to eat this cornbread, eat the cornbread. So I moved the cornbread from the bottom of the menu to the very top, the first thing, and then wrote underneath it about field ripening and artisan this, and beautiful description underneath about what the cornbread is really all about. And literally, nobody really even noticed that the bread was gone because they just started ordering cornbread. I think you had to pay for the cornbread, but at least people were trying it, and all of our work of cooking that stuff before service is not in vain, and it's nice to see it just we make it basically to order, and seeing it fly out. So that was a big thing. But we use bread in other places. We haven't excluded bread from our menu. We certainly use it in different preparations, but as far as the bread basket goes,
basket.
Exactly.
Anna?
Yeah, and we have bread. We use Liz's whole wheat flour in one of them, and we do something called finger bread or manaish, which is like a focaccia, about an inch thick, that you dimple really aggressively so you get deep pockets in it as it proofs the second time, and then we brush it with lots of olive oil and za'atar, which is a wonderful wild herb that's mixed with sesame seeds and sumac. So the bread is literally kind of filled with these pockets of olive oil and za'atar and then baked. And then we also do one with a white flour that's simit, so topped with sesame seeds. And then we do a corn bread that's a recipe from the Black Sea, which has just got some yogurt in it, and a fresh cornmeal. So.
I wanted to ask Liz about the cost and ease of harvesting the different grains. Do you do it by hand? Do you do it with machines? Is it some easier than others? And then I wanted to ask the chefs to comment on the cost of some of these grains compared to what they're replacing.
What I will say is that, so we're a small family farm. It is myself, my husband, his mom and dad, his brother, and our trusty mechanic, because without him we couldn't get through it. At this point, we're very fortunate. So like I was mentioning before, a lot of the infrastructure went away from this area. So we have teamed up with a local corn farmer where we essentially create a warm, cozy place for his combine to sleep in the winter. And we bought a grain head for it, and we can use it when we need to in the summer, which is a tremendous cost, because that can be anywhere from a couple $100,000 investment through, $500,000, which where we are just isn't possible. There is a lot of cost in terms of storing it and keeping it secure. So we've made an investment in grain silos. We were originally keeping them, if you've ever been to Europe, you'll see flour deliveries in those large fabric totes that hold, several hundred pounds. Those are not mouse-proof. And so, We made the commitment after the first year and said, okay, so if we're doing a high quality product, you have to put the investments in everywhere. And what we offer certainly is not inexpensive. We know a grain farmer from out in Idaho who chokes at the price that we get, both for our raw grain and for our flour. Part of which comes from much lower yields. So when we grow an acre of wheat, we get about 2,000 pounds per acre. If you go out to the Midwest, you can see 8,000 to 10,000 pounds per acre, which is a huge difference. They also, we're learning as we're going because so much of the institutional knowledge has disappeared. So that part gets expensive. And then what we're doing, the value added part of milling into flour. So it's really efficient if you have a mill and that mill is running 24 hours a day, all day long, to mill everything up front. But by offering it fresh milled and particularly to order so that we're not holding on to something and not wasting, that part gets expensive because it turns into keeping our mill operational 2 days a week, having a person whose job that is, and then the distribution part of getting it directly to our consumers.
For us, again, we're trying to find the very best products that we can, and and so we make it work. It's my job is to balance the menu writing so that I can buy really good ingredients and still be able to sell them to our guests. We also play around with growing some of our own grains on a very small level. This year we grew a little bit of rye, and Liz helped us learn how to clean that up. And we grew some black sorghum and some red flint corn and some Job's tears, and we learned how to process those, just with the goal of going forward in future years, growing larger amounts, and again, be able to control the quality of the ingredients we have, and also just enjoying our job, which is dealing with food.
And when you use more whole grains, can that allow you to hold back on so much protein, animal protein, that is costly? And can you balance out menuing and your costs in some ways that way if you're, opting for these nutritious whole grains?
We do use meat protein often as a supporting player in many of the dishes, and so I try and not focus on it's all about the white meat in the center of the plate.
Right.
It's about
and so
really
if you're
special
spending
ingredients.
something for the quality grain, which is allowing you to spend less on the quality protein or the animal protein.
You can use less, and I figure
Yeah.
A really good quality grain is just as important as a good quality carrot or a good quality trout or whatever.
That's music to our ears.
Yeah. That just happened to me the other day. I was kind of stressing out. I got in some squab. They're pretty expensive, and we kind of reformatted the menu a little bit at Hungry Mother and trying to move away from the same thing, the huge protein center of the plate entree. So we took them away with a lot of thought behind of what we're going to do, and so now my thought processes are different, thinking about how to present this food, and the squab was stressing me out because the breasts are so small. And they're really expensive, and so there's all these other parts. We got the beautiful, the feet's on, and we're confying the legs, and we got the giblets inside. And I'm thinking about you can make money off of those, but the breast is what is. And so it's like a squab dish. How am I going to make this a value to someone? Because we're just used to half a chicken on a plate and all this stuff. So it was interesting because then the farro came into play, and I was going to pair the squab with the farro and some chanterelles and I was like, it's not a squab dish, it's a farro dish, And I just became really happy thinking about that all of a sudden and making that switch in my mind. I'm like, and making the switch on the menu as the farro was the first thing mentioned, and then the squab was the second ingredient. And it was beautiful.
And that will immediately draw the eyes of your customer to the grain because it's got the squab in it, too.
Yeah. Or it draws their attention elsewhere, which
well, I think
sometimes
the
happens
chanterelles
too.
probably were the really expensive thing.
Right. And believe it or not, it did work to some extent having it that way, and we kept it that way a couple nights, and then I reversed it for some little psychology test and the squab was first. And so it just goes to show you how people's mentality and their perceived value of food is. The squab, the third night we sold it as a squab dish, like sold through the roof. Like, 32 of those versus 14 or 15 of the farro the night before. But it was at least,
well, you have to coax people into it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah. Do we have more questions? So one last question that I'd put out to the chefs in particular is, are there ways that you, besides Liz, because she's working with all of you, but that you would ask the purveyors of whole grains, the Whole Grains Council, to, things that they could be doing to help your business, the restaurant, in general? Whether it's, educating consumers more, what can they do for you?
Well, for me, as we see with fish and with meat proteins, the traceability aspect is, a big part of my product, I guess, at my restaurant is sort of, my promise of the healthfulness of what I'm serving. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I try and find local producers, because I have the best handle on exactly what's behind the food I'm serving. And, grains come from a lot of different places, and the more I can know about it, the better I feel about it. So for me, that would be helpful. Is the more information that's on the side of the bag, the better.
We need to get rid of Monsanto for sure. GMOs has kind of played a big role in, like, with the corn, and I kind of went to a non-GMO. All the fryer oil got changed over to sunflower, non-GMO, cornstarch, non-GMO, and I think just keep advocating for these things and educating people, and then having people eat it. That's the best way to educate people, I think, is to get it in their mouths and let them taste it, and let them know the nutritional value of it, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's a lot of improvement, but I think bottom line, if people are tasting these things and finding them delicious, then they're going to start asking for them. And I think the best thing to do is that comment about the bread basket too. Though, why not put it on the menu and use the best flours and whole grains you can find, and then if you have to charge for it to make it work, you have to charge for it. But what a better way to make a point about the quality of the wheat or whatever you're making the bread out of. But as far as what they can do for us, I think there's a wave. I think maybe if everybody can solve the gluten dilemma, then we'll get over this hump.
Absolutely. Well, how did it happen that quinoa how'd that happen? And
I think bulgur's the new quinoa, by the way.
All right, that's what we're okay. Bulgur is the new quinoa. Or maybe it's
einkorn. Einkorn's the new quinoa.
Einkorn is the. Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank all of you. I know how busy you all are, and this has been really interesting for me, and it's given me ideas. So, I hope it's been interesting for all of you. Thank you so much.